Last night, Donald Trump took a shot at Stacey Abrams, and today she's firing back and exposing the big lie he told Americans. Stay tuned because I have the full story for you next. What Trump said about the former Georgia state representative and prominent Democrat wasn't the only lie he told last night, which of course is the least shocking thing one can say after a Trump speech. CNN's Daniel Dale is here to break down the biggest lies, and then I'll share Abrams' sharp rebuttal.
I counted at least 13 flat false claims, and that is a preliminary count that doesn't include a whole bunch of additional misleading or uncorroborated claims. He, for example, repeated his false claim that foreign countries like China pay his tariffs, though Americans make those tariff payments. He wildly exaggerated figures on inflation and immigration under President Biden. He claimed to have terminated something called the Green New Scam, even though the Green New Deal congressional resolution was never actually passed, and Trump has not repealed the big environmental law that President Biden did pass. There's a lot more, as you said. You can read our full list on CNN.com. But now I want to go into detail on an important and eye-catching claim that was highly misleading. The president talked at length about millions of people being listed as alive in a Social Security database, even though they're obviously dead. Listen.
3.9 million people from ages 130 to 139. Because it just keeps getting paid and nobody does, and it really hurts.
Here's what he failed to explain. These numbers are not the numbers of dead people who are actually getting paid Social Security checks. Trump was referring to a legitimate problem with some deaths not being marked in the Social Security database, but that doesn't mean people listed as being 150, 200, 300 are actually getting money. And that's because Social Security already has a system in place to automatically cut off people who are listed as being 115 or older. Now, 2 years ago, an inspector general looked into this. She found there were about 19 million people 100 or older who were not marked as deceased, but critically, she also found that only 44,000 of these people were actually receiving payments, and one conservative expert told me even those 44K are likely legit payments, since at the time there were about 86,000 living Americans age 100 or older. Now let's listen to something the president said about the war in Ukraine.
Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion.
Those are fictional numbers, and this is a fictional narrative. President Trump keeps telling the story about how the U.S. has sent Ukraine way more than Europe has collectively. In fact, Europe has committed and provided more aid to Ukraine during this war than the U.S. has. So Trump said the U.S. has spent maybe $350 billion and Europe $100 billion. Well, a German think tank that closely tracks this issue found the U.S. has committed about $126 billion, actually allocated about $121 billion, so way less than $350 billion.
Donald Trump is a volume liar, and any one of those falsehoods could be its own story. But I chose this one because it perfectly shows how he starts with a half-truth and then spins it into a full-blown lie. His base and fellow Republicans won't bother to untangle them, but luckily CNN and Stacey Abrams break this one down for us.
At one point, he suggested without evidence that Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams is benefiting from it.
$1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams. Have you ever heard of her?
Right, with us is the two-time nominee for governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams. Thank you so much for being with us. He called you out by name. What's your response?
That he is trying to distract Americans from his failure to deliver on any of his promises. And instead of doing his work, he's going after those of us who are actually doing the work of the American people. I am very proud of the work that I've done to protect voting rights, to lower the cost of energy for real people in the state of Georgia, and working with organizations that want to do it around the country. Because Donald Trump is failing in his promises and focusing on petty retribution instead of fulfilling his promises to the American people.
What is your connection to this organization that did get funding, did get federal funding?
I led a project in Southwest Georgia that has lowered the cost of energy for struggling families, and I'm extraordinarily proud of that work. And because of that work, because of the work of 5 major organizations around this country who have done more than 250 years of service combined, the Biden administration authorized a grant. I did not work for the entity that received the grant ultimately. I worked for one of the partner organizations, but I was very much a part of pushing and showing America that we have the ability to lower prices, that the money is there, the will is there, the capacity is there. But what is not there is Donald Trump and his lackeys' willingness to actually let American people get the benefit of these services.
What would happen if the money was removed from these services, if he withdrew the funding for this program?
Then millions of Americans will lose access to lower prices. There is a young woman in Southwest Georgia whose husband died, unfortunately, because the hospital that could have saved his life had been closed due to the governor's failure to expand Medicaid, but that's a story for a different day. She saw her bill cut in half. And when you're raising children in a time when prices are on the rise, having a lower electric bill is an amazing, amazing thing. Her bill was cut in half. And what Donald Trump, what Elon Musk, what his lackeys and flunkies in Congress are saying is that they would rather have retribution than actually support the people of America. We have proof that it works. We know that it can actually help people. And they are saying, we won't let you be helped because we don't like who's offering the help. And the fact that he's using me as one of his examples simply shows that the work we're doing is effective.
Trump's attack on Abrams follows a very familiar pattern, one where facts have never mattered as much as the story he can sell to a gullible audience. He has a gift for not only creating misinformation, but weaponizing it. It's a tactic that has defined his political career and will define his legacy, a legacy built on deception, deflection, and division. But at the same time, he also has a gift for tremendous blunders like the world has never seen before, believe me. And I will leave you with this gem from last night's speech, which is a perfect example of how he can go from Donald the evil genius to Donald the dunce in the blink of an eye.
8 million to make mice transgender. Is this real life?
And you were allowed to vote. Is this real life? Now, this woman's talking about something in particular about transgender mice, but where did she get that from?
$8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
All right, so this was another one of those, if Trump said it, it has to be true moments. But Trump actually misspoke here big time. Because what Trump should have said is scientists were making mice transgenic, not transgender. And as you can see here, transgenic mouse technology has revolutionized virtually all fields of biology and provided new genetic approaches to model many human diseases in a whole animal context. So as you can see here in the transgenic mouse model, scientists add human cells to mice so that when they introduce diseases and study them, these mice and their tissue react more like human tissue. And that's how we end up at a University of Cincinnati website where they're talking about their $8 million study to continue gene-environment interaction research. So yeah, Dunny, instead of stopping research where you say it was transgender mice, you actually stopped research that might help us figure out how diseases affect the human body. And you, Danielle, you bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker just because it came out of Trump's mouth. Shame on ya.